What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Today, we're going to be wrapping up our rookie recap series where we're going to be talking about the tight end position. Now, outside of Brock Bowers, the class was just okay, at least only during their rookie years. Obviously, there's still a couple more years for these guys to break out. Tight ends typically take 2 to 3, so keep that in mind when we talk about these guys today. If this is your first time on the channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button. You don't want to miss any of the future Dynasty videos that we have coming out over here at the League FFB. But without wasting any more time, let's hop right into today's video and let's start talking about these tight ends. All right, so let's take a look at these tight ends and how they were being drafted in your 2024 rookie drafts, looking at some of the offseason ADP. Now, this is from May, so shortly after your NFL draft. You had Brock Bowers coming off the board at the 108. After that, no second round tight ends. It went all the way to the 302 where you had Ben Sinnott, followed by Ja'Tavion Sanders, Theo Johnson, Cade Stover, Eric All, Jaheim Bell, Jared Wiley, AJ Barner, and then Tanner McLaughlin, who wasn't even drafted, at least not in the top 5 rounds. So you kind of had a lot of these guys, but it was really just Brock Bowers, those 2 third-round tight ends in Sinnott and Ja'Tavion Sanders, and then you kind of had a lot of late-round dart throws. But now that we've talked about where they were drafted, how about how they performed as rookies? We all know that the cream of the crop was Brock Bowers. This was a generational tight end coming into the NFL draft, and he showed it right away. 15.5 fantasy points per game. That is just standard PPR. That's not even tight end premium points, just so you guys know at home. We are going to be talking about trading for these guys from a tight end premium perspective, but that's just PPR points, folks. 15.5. What a hell of a year for Brock Bowers. He was followed by Theo Johnson at 5.7, and then nobody else really cracked 5 fantasy points per game. It was AJ Barner, JT Sanders, Eric All, Devin Culp, Cade Stover, Ben Sinnott, Tip Ryman, and Dallin Holker. The last 3 didn't even crack 8 points. So I want to talk about 3 of these guys in particular, just in depth, talk about where their values are at in the market right now over on Keep Trade Cut. So let's kick it off with Brock Bowers. Obviously, we got to talk about him first. This is a player who finished his rookie year 3rd in receptions. He had 112 receptions for 1,194 yards. That was the 8th best in the NFL amongst all receiving options. That includes the wide receivers. He had only 5 touchdowns on the year. So I think a lot of people, they look at how Sam Laporta was valued last year coming out of 2023. He is a guy who lost a lot of value going into year 2 just because he didn't perform the same way that he did into his following year. Now, looking at how they performed, his was primarily off of touchdowns. Brock Bowers is primarily off of receptions and receiving yards. I think those stats are a little bit stickier than what we saw off of Sam Laporta, but right now this is a guy who's valued as the tight end 1 in Dynasty Fantasy Football. Now, when you're looking at Brock Bowers, this is a player who I'm holding. He obviously doesn't have any more room to grow now that he's the tight end 1 overall, but you see some of the value adjacent tight ends underneath him. There's a significant gap between him and number 2. Trey McBride is number 2, Sam Laporta, yada, yada, yada. We don't got to talk about those guys. When we go on to the adjacent overall players, he's put himself in a realm now kind of between Justin Jefferson and Joe Burrow. Now, there is a big gap between Justin Jefferson and him, and then kind of a 500-point gap between him and Joe Burrow. In your super flex leagues, I think that there's an argument that you may still want Joe Burrow over Brock Bowers, just having the value of that quarterback position, but this is a player who is going to be one of the top assets in Dynasty Fantasy Football, especially your tight end premium leagues, for a long time. I love Brock Bowers. I think he's here to stay. Like I said, those stats that he put up in year 1 are stickier than what Sam Laporta did. He should be a dominant asset for a long time and a player that I'm definitely holding at this cost. I don't want to sell him, but he's probably a little bit too expensive to buy at this price point. Now let's move on to the next tight end I want to talk about. We're going to talk about Ja'Tavion Sanders. Now, Ja'Tavion Sanders is the tight end 2 in this class. At least that was most people's tight end 2 before Ben Sinnott got that draft capital. To me, he's a sell at his current price. He's coming off of a season where he had 33 receptions for 342 yards and 1 touchdown. Now, we did have the fantasy points per game numbers that were up there towards the top of the list for folks, but a lot of his production came when Adam Thielen was off the football field this year. Now, I know that there's a chance Adam Thielen doesn't come back to the Carolina Panthers next year, and maybe that opens some things up for JT Sanders, but it does worry me that most of his production had to have the wide receiver 1 off of the football field for him to get it. Now, when Adam Thielen was on the field, he just wasn't productive for fantasy football teams, and as much as I liked him coming out of college, this team just doesn't have enough to turn JT Sanders into an elite tight end option. And yes, I know Bryce Young played a little bit better. I'm actually happy that Bryce Young was playing better, as you guys know if you've been following around the channel for a while, but JT Sanders to me at this cost is a sell. Tight end 18 overall. Let's talk about some of the value adjacent tight ends. You have him in this weird tier because he's the young guy in a tier of some older players. You have Kelsey, Jonnu, Ingram, Ben Sinnott, Cole Kmet, and Dallas Goedert. Now, it's kind of a mixed bag for me as far as to who I prefer. I think if you are looking as tight ends to perform for your fantasy football teams in the next couple of years, maybe you're a contending team and you need 2-year, 3-year windows, I think guys like Evan Engram still have juice. Guys like Travis Kelce still have juice. Maybe even guys like Cole Kmet I'm preferring at this point over JT Sanders. The other guys, Dallas Goedert, I think that's a coin flip. Jonnu, he had the one good year. Does it continue next year? I don't know. I guess that's a coin flip as well. And then some of these other guys, Ben Sinnott, who knows? He's a rookie as well. So I think it's kind of a mixed bag, but I would lean towards selling him because I would much rather be plugging in Kelce, Evan Engram, and Cole Kmet into my lineup right now over JT Sanders. When you look at the value of Jason overall, that's where I think you get even more value. You get guys like Romeo Doubs, who I think are going to be more points in your lineup each week. You have guys like Aaron Jones, who still have probably a year or two left of giving you RB2 or better numbers. I think you get that late second. Maybe that's a better player. This class is a little bit deeper at the tight end position than last year's class. Maybe that's a better tight end than JT Sanders, or you just get better running back depth, something like that in the draft. Now, some of the other assets like Marvin Mims, I don't care too much about that despite his little late season breakout. I just think JT Sanders at this cost is slightly overvalued. It's not majorly overvalued. If you want to hold him at this cost, I don't mind that as well, but I just think he's slightly overvalued in the market currently, and I would capitalize on that by selling him at this point. Now let's go to our last player that I'm going to talk about. Like I said, not a lot of tight ends to talk about in today's video. There just wasn't a lot who did much as rookies. Let's talk about Theo Johnson of the New York Giants. Now, Theo Johnson, this is a player who had a better year points per game wise than Jatavian Sanders. When you look at his production, 29 receptions for 331 yards and 1 touchdown. That's eerily similar to what JT put out. However, he did it in less games because he did spend some time hurt in this year's season. I also look at this Giants depth chart, and outside of Malik Neighbors, they really have no other receiving options. I feel like they're going to get one of the top quarterbacks in the class, whether that be Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, and or possibly they go to a veteran like Kirk Cousins. I think that there's other options, but there should be a quarterback upgrade, or at least we hope to be an upgrade coming into New York here this offseason. Theo Johnson to me is going to be the one who is the tight end 1 in this room, and because of that, currently valued as the tight end 24, I think he's possibly a buy in this market. Now, some of the value with Jason overall tight ends, he's underneath that tier that JT Sanders was in. He's valued around Noah Gray, Chigakonkwo, Brenton Strange, Dalton Schultz, Luke Musgrave, and I think this tier, there's more upside in a guy like Theo Johnson compared to the surrounding talent than there was in that tier with JT Sanders. Now, I would probably prefer Theo Johnson over Noah Gray at this point. I would prefer him over Okonkwo. I'd prefer him over Dalton Schultz, and I'd probably prefer him over Luke Musgrave as well. There's an argument for Brenton Strange depending on how you feel about Evan Engram, and I think Dallas Goedert, I would still take him despite the age of Dallas Goedert. But Theo Johnson here feels like a buy in my book. You look at the overall players, he's a little bit cheaper to buy here as well. Now, Calvin Ridley, I think he's mispriced. I don't even want to use him because I think he's a buy at that current price. Dontavion Wicks, I would probably be willing to trade my Wicks shares in a tight end premium format for Theo Johnson. Ray Davis, he's a handcuff, so unless you just want the handcuff running back to James Cook, and maybe you have James Cook, you keep him. But other than that, you have an argument of making that trade as well. Demario Douglas as well. I think all of these guys are fine swaps if you need the tight end play. You're shooting for an upside shot at tight end in Theo Johnson. That makes him a little bit of a buy in my book. And like I said, I think he can be a long-term starter here for the New York Giants. He has the athletic profile, all of the other things, and the PPG numbers weren't horrible this year. It was actually the second best in the class, just behind Brock Bowers. So mixing all of that together, that makes Theo Johnson a buy for me heading into 2025. So there you have it. That is the rookie tight end recap. Like I said, this was the shortest of all of our videos here this week when we were recapping all of the rookies. There just wasn't a lot of production out of the tight ends here in this class outside of Brock Bowers. So hopefully you guys still took something away from this one. If you want to hear my thoughts on some of the other tight ends, just comment down below and I'll try and respond to all of the comments that you have. While you're down there, make sure you hit the subscribe button, make sure you hit the like button, and make sure you go join our free Discord. We do have a free Discord linked in the description. And if you haven't watched the other videos that we were recapping the 2024 rookie class for the quarterbacks, the running backs, and the wide receivers, I strongly suggest you go check those out on this channel. But with all that being said, I have nothing else for you guys today, so I will see you on our next video. But until then, peace out.